My name is Nora Calloway. I am 36. I build legal cases for a living, not the courtroom kind, the quiet kind, the kind where someone hands me a pile of documents and a problem they cannot solve, and I sit down with a red pen and I find the thing that wins. I am a paralegal, and I have been doing this for 11 years, and the one thing this work has given me that I cannot leave at the office is the ability to recognize when a story being told to me does not match the evidence in the room. My family told me a story my whole life. I believed it for 34 years. The laugh was the moment I stopped. Let me take you back to March 2 years ago. I was 34, and I had just lost my job. Not in a dramatic way, not a scandal, not a firing, a restructuring. The entire legal department at the firm I had worked at for 6 years was dissolved in a Monday morning email, and by noon I was carrying a cardboard box to my car in a parking garage and trying to remember if I had direct deposits set up for anything that was going to bounce. It was a bad day, but I want to be honest with you. It was not the worst thing that had ever happened to me. I had savings. I had skills. I had 11 years of experience and a reputation in my field that was solid enough that 3 people had texted me by the time I reached the car offering to be references. I was going to be fine. I knew I was going to be fine. What I did not know was that telling my family I was going to be fine would be the funniest thing I had said to them in years. I called my mother that evening, Margaret Calloway, 61, retired school teacher, the kind of woman who keeps a detailed mental ledger of every family member's capability and updates it rarely. In her ledger, I had been entered at birth under the column marked capable and had never been revised upward or downward since. Capable meant she did not worry about me. Capable also meant she did not ask. I told her I had lost my job. There was a pause. Then she said, "Oh no," and the "oh" felt genuine, but the "no" had something else underneath it, a kind of settling, like news arriving that confirms something you already suspected. Then she said, "Have you thought about what you'll do?" I said, "Yes." I told her I had savings to cover several months, that I had already been contacted about 2 potential positions, that I was in a good position to take some time and find the right next step rather than panic into something that did not fit. There was a pause. And then she said, "I'll tell your father." That was the entirety of the comfort. "No, you'll be okay. No, let us know if you need anything. Just I'll tell your father," the conversational equivalent of forwarding an email without adding a message. The call with my sister Diane was shorter and worse. Diane is 31 and has spent her entire adult life being described by my mother as the one who really needed support, a description that became self-fulfilling long before I was old enough to name what I was watching. Diane has been financially supplemented by my parents in ways I was not, emotionally cushioned in ways I was not, and generally treated as the member of the family whose well-being required active maintenance while mine required none, because I was capable and had therefore been quietly deprioritized for 2 decades. Diane answered on the second ring. I told her what I told my mother. Job gone. Savings good. Prospects solid. I would be fine. And Diane laughed. Not a cruel laugh. I want to be fair about that, the way I try to be fair in my work. It was not the laugh of someone who wanted me to suffer. It was the laugh of someone who found the gap between my confidence and my situation genuinely amusing. The laugh of someone who had been told her whole life that Nora always lands on her feet, and who had never once been asked to hold her breath while waiting to find out if it was true. She laughed, and she said, "Oh my God, Nora, you are so you," and then she told me about a problem she was having with her landlord, which took 12 minutes, and then we got off the call. I sat in my apartment that night with my phone on the table, and I thought about both calls. My mother's forwarded email energy, Diane's fond dismissal, the combined message of both of them, which was, "We believe you'll be fine the same way we believe the sun will rise." Not because we checked, because we stopped. I want to tell you what the 2 years looked like, because the 83 calls do not mean anything without them. I found a new position 6 weeks after losing the old one. Better firm, better title, 15% more than I had been making. The transition was uncomfortable the way transitions are, but it was not a crisis. And by week 8, I was settled, and the only evidence that any of it had happened was a gap in my resume that I knew how to explain. I called my mother to tell her. She said, "That's great, honey," and then asked me if I had heard about Diane's situation with the landlord because it had gotten complicated. I want you to notice what just happened in that phone call. I want you to hold it because it is going to become important. I called to report that I had come through a difficult thing successfully, and my mother received that information, processed it in approximately 4 seconds, and redirected the conversation to Diane's ongoing problem. Because here is the thing about being the capable one in a family. Your victories are not interesting. They are expected. When Diane has a problem, it is a problem. When Diane solves a problem, it is a triumph worth celebrating. When I have a problem, it is a momentary anomaly. When I solve it, I have simply returned to baseline. I said the right things about Diane's landlord. I got off the call. I sat at my kitchen table, and I opened a notebook to a clean page, and at the top I wrote one question. What does this family actually do when I need something? Then I wrote the answer underneath it, and the answer was one word: nothing. Not nothing out of cruelty. I want to keep saying that because I know my family and I know the difference. Nothing out of a belief so deep it was invisible to all of us that Nora does not need anything because Nora is always fine. A belief I had spent 34 years building with my own 2 hands by being fine, by handling it, by never asking, by making the capable column in my mother's ledger so consistently accurate that nobody had thought to question whether the ledger told the whole story. I had trained them to ignore me. That was the painful truth I sat with at that kitchen table. But the other painful truth was that I had let them. Over the next 2 years, I kept the notebook, not obsessively, not angrily, the way I keep notes on a case, because I am a person who documents, and documentation does not lie. I wrote down the things I noticed, the way you write down the evidence that builds a picture slowly. The birthday where Diane's gift from my parents was a weekend away, and mine was a phone call 2 days late. The family dinner where my new promotion was mentioned once, and Diane's job interview, which she did not get, was discussed for 40 minutes. The time I had a minor surgery, outpatient, nothing serious, and mentioned it to my mother on a Tuesday, and she called me the following Sunday to ask how a thing completely unrelated had gone. And I realized she had not retained the surgery information long enough to ask about it. Each thing on its own was small. Together on paper, they looked like what they were. A family that loved me the way you love furniture. Glad it is there. Grateful when it is useful. Completely uninterested in whether it is comfortable. I want to stop here because I think some of you are doing math right now on your own families, and the total is making your stomach hurt. Drop that in the comments. Tell me what the total looks like for you. And if this story is sitting somewhere real, hit the engagement party was James's idea. A small thing, he said, just family and close friends. A chance for our people to meet each other before the wedding. His family arrived the way his family does everything. Organized, warm. His mother brought food she had made herself. His father shook my hand and looked me in the eye and said, "James talks about you constantly," and said it like it was a good thing. My family arrived 40 minutes late. I want to be precise about what happened next because I have been precise about everything else, and this deserves the same care. My mother walked in, looked around the room, registered James's family on one side and ours on the other, and walked directly to James's mother to introduce herself. Not to me, not to James, to the room she wanted to make an impression in. My father followed her the way. He always follows her, one step behind, nodding. Diane arrived with her boyfriend Trevor, who I had met twice and who she had been describing as potentially serious for 14 months. She hugged me and said, "You look amazing," and then spent the next 40 minutes talking to James's sister about Trevor's career aspirations, while James's sister nodded politely, and I watched from across the room. I had James on my left, and a glass of wine in my hand, and my notebook voice in my head, quietly recording everything the way it always did. Then James's father gave a toast, short and genuine and kind. He talked about watching his son become someone he was proud of, and about how clear it was from the way James talked about me that I was the reason that happiness had somewhere to land. The room was warm and quiet, and I felt James's hand find mine. Then my mother stood up. She gave a toast too. She talked about how she had always known I would find my person, how she had always believed in me, how this family stuck together through everything, and how wonderful it was to finally all be together. James squeezed my hand. I smiled the smile that takes no effort because I have been practicing it since I was old enough to understand that some things are said in rooms and other things are true, and sometimes those are not the same sentence. Afterward in the car, James asked me what I was thinking. I said I was thinking about a word my mother used. Finally, he waited. Finally, all be together. I said, as though 2 years ago, when I lost my job and called them and heard nothing back for a week, and my sister laughed, as though that was also together. As though together is something that exists in this family independent of what they get from it. He did not say anything for a moment. Then he said, "Do you want to tell me about the 2 years?" And I did. All of it. The cardboard box in the parking garage. The forwarded email phone call. Diane's laugh. The notebook. The birthday calls that came late. The surgery my mother forgot before Sunday. The promotion that was processed in 4 seconds and redirected. All of it. He listened to the whole thing. Every sentence. Then he said the thing that mattered. He said, "I want you to know that what you just described is not what family is supposed to feel like. And I want you to know that wherever we build ours, it is not going to feel like that." I looked at him in the dark car. I said, "I know." And then my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "So wonderful tonight. We are so proud of our Nora. Always knew you'd land on your feet. Always knew." As though knowing someone will land is the same as watching out for them while they are falling. I showed James the text. He read it. He did not say anything. He just looked at me with the particular expression of a man who now understood completely. I put my phone in my bag, and I looked out the window at the city going past, and I thought about the notebook and the 2 years and the word finally and the laugh that started all of it. And then I made a decision, not a dramatic one, not a revenge plan, just a quiet decision, the way I make all my decisions carefully and with the evidence in front of me.